Scott Pacitti. Pacitti.
You said it correctly. I'm very impressed. Thank you.
I thought I was wrong. Hi, Scott. Welcome to the Growing Community
Hello.
Show.
Thank you. My honor, my pleasure to be here.
How are you today?
I'm doing wonderfully. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I gave my version. Well, I stole some words and maybe not some others, but we'll call it my version of what you do. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Certainly. Most of the things we do they revolve around improv, improvisational theater, and the improvisational mindset. We try to do as many different things with that as possible. So, for example, what most people think of, we entertain with improv. Most people have seen Whose Line Is It Anyway or been to an improv show. We do that. We also work with the corporate community. These days, with things changing as quickly as they do, it is good for people in a corporate setting to be as nimble as possible. So part of being nimble is having an improv mindset so that instead of winding up in the fetal position when something goes differently than you had anticipated, you can perhaps go to plan B, C, D, E, F, or wherever you need to go in the alphabet, and that's helpful to them. Probably the thing that fills me and my colleagues with the most joy with what we do is we oftentimes get to educate, and especially in schools, with children in an after-school setting, during the school setting, and teaching them what to the untrained eye looks just like fun and laughter and smiling and perhaps doing silly things, but is actually teaching them real-world skills for both life and a lifetime that center around improv theater, and the improv mindset.
So your company, Planet Improv, you founded it, right?
That is correct.
What made you want to start this company?
Well, it's an interesting story, or at least an interesting story to me. I read a newspaper article about a local young lady. She was actually from the Fort Mill Tega area. She moved to Chicago for business, and she was deathly afraid of public speaking. So, as many people sometimes do, she took improv classes.
That's brilliant.
She fell in love with the art form and fell in love with improv. She returned back home, and when she got back to that area, she couldn't find improv classes or improv in the area. So she said to herself, I think I will start classes. I think I will start an improv troupe here locally. I saw that newspaper article where I was working. I didn't know what improv was at the time, but it sounded fun. I always considered myself a creative person. So took the classes. I was soon asked to become part of her troupe. And then after a couple of years, the baby bird left the nest and decided that I wanted to do improv on my own with my own group, starting a company or multiple companies that revolved around improvisational theater. And it evolved over the years. It went from improv just as entertainment to improv education, and to improv how can it help our community, especially the young students among us in schools, and especially those who are in underserved communities and schools who perhaps are having financial difficulties, and even students who have developmentally disabled on the autism scale. So I found something that I was truly passionate about, and then figured out, well, how can I give back to the community which has given so much to me? And that's the journey we continue to be on at Planet Improv.
There's nothing better than finding something that you are passionate about and knowing that it serves two purposes. One, it fills you with joy, but two, it also helps other people, right?
That's the thing, and that's the tricky part. I think most of us at one point or another in our lives, we go on that search for that thing that will light our fire and make us passionate. And, it's not like there's an arrow on the road or it comes to you in a dream or things like that. You just have to search and search and search. And if you're fortunate, one day you find it.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier educating through improv.
Correct.
What would that look like?
Well, it takes many forms, and it depends on if we're going into a school, what does that specific class, that specific teacher, that specific administrator, principal, what are they looking to impart to their students? And we have multiple classes and sessions that we offer for students. Mm-hmm. They can be things such as anti-bullying sessions, where, as you can imagine, improv and role-playing can be quite effective in helping either those who are being bullied and they're just not sure of how to handle that situation, or perhaps someone's in the session and they are being bullied and it finally dawns upon them that, gosh, I'm not the only one out here that is going through that. And perhaps they ask a question or they listen to some advice that we give, or even more importantly, they listen to the feedback that we get from their classmates. Mm-hmm. Because, me, old guy, who hasn't been in a classroom other than teaching in it for decades, what do I know about the realities of being in school these days? What do I know? I know what I learned from the students that I work with.
Yeah.
So there's anti-bullying workshops. Obviously, for those who are into theater, improv theater, learning more about that or learning about it at all, or perhaps, again, those in an underserved community or a school who maybe they're doing their best to teach the basics, but they don't have the time, the effort, the teachers, the money to introduce their students to, the arts. And, can I and my organization help by coming in, perhaps, igniting a passion in them that they did not know that they had for being creative, for being imaginative. Maybe they are on their own, but this tells them another path that perhaps they can go down that gets them excited about school. Because some of us, and you may or may not have been this way, I know I was at times, there are classes that excite us. Mm-hmm. There are classes that, we do because we have to. And then there are extracurriculars that we do that get us excited about school. So that's another thing. There are many other types of things. Believe it or not, we one time went into a school and taught World War II with improv.
Oh, that should be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just about getting children excited and motivated, and again, utilizing the creativity and imagination that most students have. It's just not being fully utilized. Or again, oftentimes, adults say to children, and they say it with the best intentions, hey, it's time to be mature. It's time to grow up. It's time to not be so silly. And what we're doing oftentimes is we're extinguishing what can be very helpful to them, even in a real-life professional environment.
Yeah.
A lot of employers these days list creativity and imagination and flexibility of mind as top of their list of what they're looking for new employees.
Well, I don't think I got that message because I laugh all the time. Actually, I'm told I giggle too much. So
you never have to apologize in my presence for doing that. So
haven't matured yet.
Giggle all the time when you're with me. That's no problem at all.
So I was thinking while you were talking about the education piece, have you ever seen a situation where a business owner, a group of business owners, for example, that light bulb went off in terms of creativity that maybe sparked a new business idea?
Sure. The example I often give when I'm doing corporate workshops, which I do quite a bit, is, we've all had the pleasure or displeasure, more than likely, of being in a brainstorming session.
Oh, God, yes.
Where someone determines, it's time for a new idea, it's time to make the budget for the quarter, et cetera, et cetera. So whoever's highest on the food chain will get the people together, and then they'll say, okay, let's start brainstorming. And someone very meekly will raise their hand, and they'll timidly tell their idea. And in a very badly run organization, the person who's in charge will say, not in so many words, but they'll get the point. Well, that's one of the stupidest ideas I've ever heard in my life. And guess how many other people want to give their opinions and brainstorm after that? So basically, to make a long story short, in improv, we have two words that are chiseled into granite that we live by. Two very tiny words, three-letter words, and they are yes and. And what yes and means is that we listen as people come up with ideas, and we do our best to build on those ideas. So is the first idea that comes up, is it perfect? Does it come out fully formed? In most cases, no, it does not.
Right.
But the rest of the people sitting around the table or in the office or wherever these ideas are formulated and reformulated, they get their piece of sandpaper and maybe sand down a little bit of the idea, or they add something to it. And by the end, we started out with idea A, maybe we're down to idea X, and everybody can buy into that idea because they've been a part of it. It hasn't gone, as they say in corporate speak, just top down.
Right.
It has perhaps even come bottom up, where people can buy into that idea as opposed to having a finger wagged at them and said, you're going to do this because we tell you so.
Right.
You can have buy-in. And again, and that allows because if because everybody, how many people in our audience today are sitting at their job, well, not sitting at there today perhaps, but in general.
Right.
And they have all these ideas that they can offer, but they don't feel comfortable because they don't feel like those above them are interested in hearing their ideas. Or even if they do, they might not buy into them or bring them to fruition. So yes, creativity, imagination, so many different, and it can help any business in the world. I mean, I can't imagine even people who say, well, my business isn't creative. I'm a this, I'm a that. We work for this. I would fight back on that and say, no, there's creativity and imagination in every business that there is.
That's an interesting approach, because usually when you hear about improvisation, you think about, actors and you think about, yes, entertainment in some point, but you don't really think about the corporate aspect of it. And what you just said, even brainstorming, not so much brainstorming session, right? Making it fun, making it creative.
Yeah, definitely. And that's part of, as an improv professional and as a gentleman who has a business that's centered around improv, I tell people all the time that it's my job to sort of what I call bridge build. Because again, you hear that 5-letter word, and it makes you think of whatever your association with it has been. If you're a Whose Line Is It Anyway fan, you think of that show. If you've been to Chicago or any place across the United States or internationally that you've seen a live improv show, that's what you think of. But most people haven't taken any sort of improv training. Or if they think about it, they think, well, you're training me to be a comedian, to be an actor, to be a performer. But again, there are so many real-life skills that one can learn. I mean, the majority of the people that I've worked with in the almost 20 years that I've been doing improv had no interest in being a comedian or an actor or a performer. It's the peripheral skills that they learn from it for their professional life and their personal life that has made it worthwhile for them.
So what do you do with the folks who are nervous, like they have social anxiety? How do you coax them into?
Well, as I tongue-in-cheek say a lot of times when I'm starting a session or inviting someone to a session, the beginning of our sessions are basically, talk people down off a wall sort of a thing, or bring down their walls. And it took me almost 20 years to figure this out. So some may say, well, how bright can you be if it took you that long to figure it out? But I think finally, after thinking about it way too long, I think the reason people are fearful of that 5-letter word is because of one word, judgment.
Yes.
They fear the judgment of others when they're trying it, or more importantly, they fear their own judgment because, and you don't have to tell me if you fall under this, but I'm guessing that you might. There are those of us who suffer from a little thing called perfectionism.
No, not me.
And we want to, the very first second we do anything, we want to be an expert at it.
Yeah.
And when we aren't an expert at something immediately, the kind of the cliche of, going outside of your comfort zone. But what I try to do is reassure people that, no matter what happens in any of these sessions, no matter what you say or do, the sun will most likely come up tomorrow. Those who know, like, and love you will more than likely know, like, and love you tomorrow and beyond. And again, the bottom line is, we're hopeful to learn some things, some very important things. But we're also here to have fun, to smile, to laugh, to to have camaraderie, to socialize, to meet new people, perhaps to network. So there's so many more important things other than I have to do this exactly right, because there is no such thing in improv as doing it exactly right. Just like in life, none of us are perfect, and you embrace the imperfection of yourself, and you learn from the quote-unquote mistakes that you make. And again, it took me a long, long time to figure that out and learn that, but it's truly the way I live my life now.
Well, I'm a recovering perfectionist.
There you go. As am I. You're never completely cured of that. It pops up when you least expect it.
Oh my God, I'm just improvising in life right now.
And that's the thing that I chuckle with people. I say, most people don't realize it, but every single day of our life,
yes,
we are improvising. Yeah, we have these grand plans, and we hope that they're going to work out perfectly, but 9 times out of 10, again, plan A turns to plan B, C, D, E, F, and again, you have 2 choices. You can either keep moving along, or you can curl up in the fetal position.
Wow, you just blew my mind now, because I'm like, okay, to live life is to improvise. Look at that.
There you go. Hopefully I've made another convert.
Okay, Scott, so I know we're talking Planet Improv, but I know that there are 2 segments. How do you differentiate between those 2?
Sure. The actual names of both, the for-profit and the nonprofit, the nonprofit is Planet Improv Incorporated, and that's been around for almost 13 years. And then last year, 2019, I started Planet Improv Educational Services, LLC. So basically the way the 2 are differentiated, for the nonprofit, basically that handles donations from the public, which are in most cases tax deductible. And then also if we do any sort of grant work, if we've been fortunate enough to receive multiple grants from the city of Charlotte, and we're always on the lookout for ways to collaborate with organizations and work together, perhaps with some grant funding. So that's the nonprofit. The for-profit, Planet Improv Educational Services, LLC, those are, as we talked about before, the things that most people would think about when they think about improv, holding an improv comedy show, teaching people who are into theater or acting improv sessions, or even, as we talked about, corporations offering improv classes for their executives or employees. So those are the things that most people have experienced. But again, the educational side of things, that's the thing that sometimes takes a little bit of discussion. And again, going into schools in an after-school setting, or during a school day, or just a multitude of teaching them real-world and life lessons that I like to say it's like grape cough syrup. It's good, and it's good for you. So they're laughing and they're smiling and they're having a good time, and we sneak in some lessons or 2, and it's just a lot of fun, as I've mentioned.
So you mentioned doing something with autistic kids a little bit earlier.
Yes.
And a lot of kids learn differently, right?
Correct.
So we have an educational structure that fits one mold, and then there are tons of people who probably don't fit within that mold, who needs a different approach.
Correct.
So when you guys go into these schools to educate some of these kids, what are the things are you seeing in terms? Do you see positive feedback? What are you seeing?
Definitely. In the world we live in, we oftentimes talk about discrimination. The discrimination that most annoys me is the discrimination that there is anyone who cannot be creative or imaginative. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes, the developmentally disabled in our schools, and it's all very well-meaning. Certainly none of the teachers or the administrators are trying to do anything bad, but, they're so busy trying to sort of teach the basics that some of the peripheral things that might bring joy fall by the wayside.
Right.
And then there are also obviously the challenges that go along with that. Some of them are less physically mobile than others. Others are less verbally agile than others. So my goal is always to, meet them at least halfway, if not more than halfway. What is your skill set, and how can I help you be imaginative and creative with the tools that you've been given? And as I say to people, I've said it recently, the thing that really brings me the most joy, well, obviously, it is the creativity, no matter how it's done, whether it's completely silently, whether it's verbally. But what I oftentimes do is, when I'm in a session, is I'm looking around at the teachers and the caregivers, and to watch their smiles and the pride that's beaming in their eyes, perhaps somebody who isn't regularly verbal. They get excited and they do talk, or they do sing, or they do dance, or they do whatever.
Right.
And to be just a small part of helping elicit those responses, I don't say this in a selfish way, but it's very gratifying to me. And on those days sometimes when I'm a little bit draggy, even in something fun like improv, not everything is always perfect. It, fills my heart with and my passions, and, keeps me going for another day.
So do you, obviously you guys have, a group and staff, right? But do you also take volunteers?
My door is literally and figuratively always open. I'm overjoyed to collaborate with anyone, anytime, whether they come in it from the art side, from the educational side, from the corporate side. Whatever brings them to me in this world, and whatever way it makes sense for them to collaborate with myself or anybody that I collaborate, or oftentimes if I can just get them in touch with people who can help them, regardless of anything that it does for me or my organization. So, I'm never going to turn anyone down. I'm never, especially passionate people.
Right.
If you are passionate about anything, even if it's something that I'm not that excited about, because we walk around sometimes and we talk to people who are sort of in a haze and they're sort of down and, oh, woe is me, and, but, talking to passionate people no matter what they do and being in their orbit is always a wonderful thing.
So I'm going to try to put you in the spot for a second.
Okay. Good luck.
I'm going to try.
Thank
I'm
you.
pretty sure it's not going to work.
Okay.
But can you share with us one of your very favorite memories in what you do?
Sure. I mean, it's like the cliche about asking a parent, which is their favorite child and things like that.
I know, it's hard.
It's... I'll think of one recently, okay, that really touched me. I was visiting a school recently, and I was talking to one of the teachers prior to our session. And it was a group of developmentally disabled students and autistic students. And the teacher said to me, "You know what? Hardly anybody ever comes to see us or work with us." And I just said, to myself, well, maybe this, amongst all the other things that, not to get too ponderous, but the things I was put on earth to do, and things like that, and my organization does. Maybe this is something where, again, not to sound egotistical, maybe this is where we can really make a difference in this lifetime. Again, the gifts that I've been given and the blessings that I have, I can pay it forward.
Okay, Scott, so we've been talking a lot about the things that you do and your company does. But from your perspective, I just want to hear it in your own words. How does what you do impact the growth in communities?
Well, again, we've been very fortunate recently to get some City of Charlotte grants, and I've been fortunate enough to be around a lot of people who are making quite a difference in the local community, and it has inspired me. And it also made me sort of rethink what I was doing. I've already been out in the community, again, not to sound braggadocious, but making a difference by working with children. But this sort of refocused and relit the passion that is inside of me to just say, think of some of the non-traditional paths that I or my organization can take, some organizations that people might not be thinking about. And just off the top of my head, perhaps, for instance, like we talked about, the homeless community. I've been fortunate enough to collaborate with many organizations that who get people who are down on their luck and reintroduce them to the working world. How can I help them? Perhaps people who are drug addicted, alcohol addicted, unfortunately, victims of abuse. And again, giving them an opportunity to tell their stories, to let other people know who may be in similar situations, you are not alone.
Right.
So again, reaching out to a lot of the non-traditional, again, not comedians, not theater people, not whatever, although we will always do that, but reach out into other, because there are so many communities, so many people who sometimes are just looking for someone to listen or to talk to. And, we're happy to be those ears and help them in whatever way we can.
Or just even giving them a different perspective, right?
Yeah. And
it's okay. Life, we just have to live it. That's all we have to do.
And can't all of us use that every now and then, a new perspective?
Yes. So if someone wants to get in contact with you or your company, how can they do that?
The best way to do so, we obviously have a website, as everyone else does. The one for our nonprofit is obviously www.planetimprovinc.org. And don't put an E in there. Oftentimes computers will want to autocorrect and make it improve instead of improv. So www.planetimprovinc.org. And then for the for-profit, and sometimes they bleed a little bit into each other, but that's just strictly www.planetimprov.com. And you'll always find my contact information on everything. Happy to communicate with people however they are most comfortable doing so. Telephone, email, Zoom, whatever way somebody feels comfortable with. I love to sit down and talk to people, find out how I can help them. Again, even if we get nothing out of it, helping someone is its own reward.
So if there are listeners out there who are not in the Charlotte area, could they still call?
I would never refuse to talk to anyone, especially when it's about improv and the things that I know and love and are passionate about. So reach out to me anytime.
Awesome. Well, Scott, you are amazing. Okay. And I would definitely love to see you back on the show. Not selling anything, just saying. It was a pleasure having you here today.
And it was my pleasure as well. And I'm going to put this out to you. I would love to see you in one of our improv classes.
I knew that was coming.
There you go.
I knew that was coming.
And the other people that are in this room who shall remain nameless, you are certainly invited as well.